what do you know about this current event around the Standing Rock tribe, Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and these things? So some sort of intro into it.
Yeah.
And give some of your perspective on it or questions you have going down that road.
Yeah. So Jason Craven from Gainesville, Georgia. I don't know a ton about it right now. What's going on? I know there's I guess a tribe that's kind of protesting a pipeline they're wanting to put in. I know it's not Keystone, which is the big one that's been in the news lately, but other than that, I'm not sure. Other than I know there's a court case and a decision coming up on Friday that might end up with some nice fireworks to watch or something like that, just depending on how things go. But I don't know a ton about it, other than there's a pipeline putting in and they're protesting it. So I'm a free market guy. I definitely am a believer in the free market. There's a challenge you run into because typically free market is all about regulating distribution of resources, scarce resources. So you've got the price mechanism where people are exchanging goods, and that's pretty good for managing when you have a particular commodity or whatever, and I want to sell it to you. The market will set a price that'll sort of be based on how rare that resource and how important that resource is. The more important and more rare it is, the higher price, because that's the best way to manage resource consumption, I think. And that's why I'm big on the free market, because I think it solves that problem very well of managing resources that you can't do from a centrally planned location, because how do you prioritize things? How do you place value on things? And two, having the price signal there to actually signal to the market that maybe we need substitutes for this commodity, right? Maybe there's alternatives we need to look at. That's, energy is one of those things that it's so regulated and so controlled that it's hard to tell what the market would do if the government got out of the way there. But the challenge you do run into once you get past the basic first and second party exchange is third party effects. So there are people that aren't necessarily involved in a transaction, or that are not necessarily involved in any of the activity, the economic activity going on, that then they could have effects that they suffer that aren't related to that. And that's one of the things that's a big environmental side of things. A lot of people look at, I tend to have more of a libertarian perspective, but libertarian doesn't mean no government or anarchy. It's there to secure our rights to our life, liberty, and property. Well, if I've got land and the guy next door has an oil well, and then there's an oil spill because of him and whoever he's selling it, and it pollutes my land, and I lose value of my land because of the oil spill, then how do I remedy that? The market doesn't remedy that. And that's the proper place for government, is to get in and regulate and manage these unintended third-party effects, or just the third-party effects that occur from a lot of activity that aren't priced into the market system there. The problem I have with current regulatory environment is it gets to be the tragedy of the commons to a degree, to where if everyone is owning something, then that's the one thing that doesn't get taken care of, because no one suffers a loss, right? If I've got a car and I care about it, I'm going to take and get the oil changed and all that. But if we've got a public car that the neighborhood shares, that thing's going to get beat up. It's not going to get cared for, not like it is if it's my own property. The other challenge that you get with the federal government and other regulatory system is it's a system that gets gamed by the guys with money, all right? So we get laws, we get these congressmen in place, and they pass these laws to do what we think we want them to do. And then the campaign to get that law passed is over, and then that's when the real action happens. That's when it goes to the regulatory agencies, and then the regulations get written, because the law that gets passed in Congress isn't the regulation. The regulation comes out of that. And then that's when the lobbyists come in, and that's when the big industry comes in, and they leverage their money to get the regulations written in their favor. So they end up not really getting to pay the penalties that they would pay in a proper system, where in my view, very limited regulatory, where there's very limited regulations, but the judicial system actually would provide for proper remedy to be from people that suffer consequences to third-party activity. I think it's convoluted, and that's what happens when you have a large regulatory system like that. Is there's a lot of people that have to get paid in that process, right? There's bureaucrats that are administering all these different programs and whatever. They're all getting paychecks. There's contracts with contractors to provide services. They're all getting their cut, plus their profit that's priced into that contract. So you end up with this system where, rather than just having the person who committed the violation that did the damage to someone's property paying them directly for their losses, it goes through this web of bureaucrats and contractors and everything else to where it finally gets to the people that were harmed, and they really get a fraction of what the real loss that they suffered is. So it's like, I feel the same way about our healthcare system. It's a very similar type of thing where you've got insurance companies, they've got all of their doctors and administrators and bureaucrats that are in there that have to run through the process and approve what you get done. And now, because of the doctors work direct with the insurance company, not with you for payment, they've got all of their billing people and all that. There's so many people getting paid that for everyone to get paid what, even if you believe in just a fair wage, right? It's an expensive system because you have so many people involved. And that cost just blows up the more we want to try to micromanage this stuff. Whereas in a good system, in the system I believe in, which is a free market with a judicial system that allows for civil lawsuits to go forward and set up not where the person with the best lawyers is the one that wins. A system where it's set to actually provide justice, not a process of justice like our current system is. We guarantee a process, but we don't guarantee justice, getting to the right answer. And so you end up with the guys with the best lawyers know how to game the system. They've already had their buddies and the lobbyists get the right regulations written, so they get an out, and they don't have to pay as much, or they can get out. There's a maximum fee or whatever it happens to be that they've gamed into the system. Because of this big convoluted mess, you can sneak in little outs here and there if you've got the power. And so with a pure system where you have a judicial system that is centered around finding truth and getting to a judicious or a just solution, then you start seeing a lot of these things go away. And it's not as costly either. People get really compensated for their loss, and the people that have committed a violation and can cause damage to someone's property or whatever, they pay an actual price reflecting on what they did. That's getting a real price on the pollution or whatever it happens to be that they did. You almost end up with something arbitrary, right? And it has to, because obviously if I'm offended, and how do we set that threshold? Is it just something we guess what I would have taken for that property if we would have sold the market? Well, if it's priceless to me, then that's a very high number. And if it's based on what's priceless to me, billions of dollars for an acre of land, it just doesn't seem like that's quite right either. So that's a very difficult thing to put a price on. Yeah, I mean the real key point of the market and a libertarian, small L, not the party, philosophy is voluntary exchange. Not the non-aggression principle. I'm not using any force to compel you to do anything. We're both in agreement of how we're going to exchange. Once that's violated, then it gets a little sketchy. And that's where, for me, my belief in a proper judicial system is much different than what we have today. It's something where the entry to a civil suit or whatever is much easier, but not as costly on the plaintiff side either. And then I also think that civil and criminal should be tied together, so that if I do something to cause you damage, to deny you, because really the fundamental idea of government is to protect our life, liberty, and property. If I'm doing something to violate your property or your liberty or your life, even if it's just a civil side of it, there should also be a potential of a criminal within the same case. And if you look at things and you approach it from that perspective, then I think you get a system where people are a little less likely to get into court. Yeah, I've always been, I guess, to some degree, a capitalist, although I really hate that term because I think it's a little loaded these days. That's why I like the term free market. And I think I've just seen through the years how when you have a highly regulated system, like most of our markets are, it gets taken advantage of by the powerful. See, the whole idea is that we create these regulations to protect the average person from the big powerful people. But then at the end of the day, the big powerful people game the system and get the rules set up so that it works to their advantage. And then it still works against the people. You see things in the news where people are, corporations do something, and then it causes a lot of damage to someone, maybe even causes some people their lives, and they just pay a fine. You know, like there was the, what was the name of the company up in West Virginia with the coal mines? I forget the name of it, but you know, the coal mining company, they had all of these regulatory violations, and they just paid the fines. And then you end up having all those people killed in that mine accident a while back. And what do? They're just going to pay some fines. You know, there's no one held accountable. You know, and the whole idea is that we're going to create these regulations to protect us and hold people accountable. But that doesn't happen. The system gets gamed. And just in my life, as I've progressed along, I've seen the way that works, and I understand the reasoning behind saying, hey, we want to regulate it, we need to protect people and things like that. But I've also seen it in practice. And the concept is great, but the practice is very flawed, and I don't see how you get it right, because there's just too much to think about. There's too many angles to have to look at, that you really need a simplified thing, which is that we all have a right to our life, our liberty, and our property. And if anyone does anything to violate that, they should have to reimburse us, or, you know, make us whole again. Or also even pay consequences, you know, criminally. And anything beyond those rules sets up loopholes. And loopholes, you know, when you've got good lawyers, you can figure out all the ways to slide through, you know, and not suffer consequences. So that's where it's a big thing. You know, I mean, I hear a lot of people say, well, we need more regulations to protect us from corporations. It's like, well, okay, I'm a big believer in the free market. And in the free market, there are no corporations. The only reason corporations exist is because there's government regulations that say they exist. Government regulations is what creates these corporations and protects people, gives them limited liability, allows them to stand behind the shadow of that corporation so that they don't suffer any consequences of their actions. Their corporation just pays fine. Their corporation might even have to be dissolved, but they still suffer no consequences. And this is where, you know, seeing all of these things, seeing how the system gets gamed, that's how I've kind of come to where I believe that a simpler system that's more just straightforward and requires a judicial system that's got a lot of common sense and a lot more leeway than we have today, that would be a better system where these people can't game it. And I think that's one of the things you're going to see on Friday when this court thing's announced. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised if you get there and the ruling comes out and the pipeline's going through, regardless of what these people want. And it's because the system's set up where the guys with lawyers, the guys with money, because of the rules, because of the big machine, that's what it takes to make it work.